My name is Max Gagliardi, and you're listening to the Talk.Energy Podcast. Coming today with a special bonus episode with returning guest Marty Bent, the host of the Tales from the Crypt podcast, and also of Great American Mining. Marty and I did a late night session rip at the North American Petroleum Expo after a long day of happy hours and some pretty good wine at dinner. Might have been ill-advised, but you know, when Uncle Marty wants to do a podcast, you do a podcast. So look, you got to make the content, got to put it out there. So we went stream of consciousness and covered a bunch of different topics. Talk about Bitcoin, obviously. Talk about energy, mining. Marty driving an F-150, living in Texas now. We talk about what's going on in Afghanistan. We cover the future of how Bitcoin is going to disrupt athletics, how it's going to disrupt monetary systems. We cover a bunch of different random things. So anyways, we thought we would put this out into the world. This is the first episode that I'm going to drop from NAPE. Next week I got some more coming out. So stick with me. Hope you enjoy the show.
Oh shit, are we live?
You are live. That's what it says. We're here live at NAPE. Thanks for coming out. We had fun tonight. Dinner was good.
Dinner was very good. NAPE. What's going on with NAPE? Am I underdressed? Let's start with that. Am I underdressed?
You're not underdressed.
I'm wearing Vans, chinos, and a button-down golf shirt.
You look fantastic, Marty.
I feel fantastic, but
no, you look good. I mean, I think that it's like NAPE is overdressed, right? I mean, these blazers. If you're in August and you're in a full suit or a blazer in Houston, you're overdressed.
I'm not trying to say who's overdressed, who's underdressed. Let's just dress for the temperature, the climate of the particular day, the particular event that you're at.
Yeah.
Everybody looked very hot today. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, they looked hot. They looked like they were
literally hot, sweating.
Yeah, absolutely. So you came to the NAPE today. This is an oil and gas thing. I was like pressuring you to say like you're an oil and gas guy now. Do you feel like an oil and gas guy?
No. I mean, I feel like I've been more acclimated with oil and gas than most people have been in their lives. However, I would never say I'm an oil and gas guy because I feel like that would be disrespecting true oil and gas guys.
Well, you're consuming energy to mine Bitcoin, so and a good source of energy is oil and gas. So I think that you're dipping into that realm, whether you want to or not. Great American Mining is basically an oil and gas company, I think, or I've been pushing you guys to say that you should classify in some ways as that.
Well, let's simplify it a little bit. We're not an oil and gas company. We're just a gas company. You can't really mine Bitcoin with oil, can you?
You can subsidize Bitcoin with oil.
That's a good point. Like imagine you bought a well, subsidize the mining operation with the oil sales, and just use the gas to mine Bitcoin and get that rip.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, it's like, what do you want to spend? Like, so Bitcoin mining is OPEX driven. And if you could have other sources of revenue, like oil revenues, like you could subsidize that with the oil revenues. But if you had to buy oil, that's less money you can spend towards mining Bitcoin. So that's the rub, right?
Yeah, that's the rub. But if you owned all of it, again, you were able to subsidize the gas they were just pouring in generators to mine Bitcoin with the gas they were selling to market, those cash flows to make sure that you could hold as much Bitcoin as possible. I think that, like, just conceptually, again, I'm not an oil and gas guy. I don't know the intricacies.
You are, though. You're at NAPE here in Houston, Texas.
And
you live in Texas now.
Look at me.
You look good, Marty. But you live in Texas now. You're a Texan, right? I mean, technically.
I think Texans would look at me and say, "You're not a Texan yet." Yeah,
you're getting close.
I feel
you're getting close.
What I will say is, I was drawn to Texas. I may not be a Texan, but I very much respect the ways of the Texan and hope to be able to live up to the mantle of the Texan in the long run.
I heard that you rented an F-150.
I did. Oh, luxurious! A lot of
leg
room. And it wasn't me that noticed it. It was my wife. She was sitting passenger seat, and she was like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah,
like I can't even reach I can't even reach the floorboards.
Feels good.
Oh well, especially as you have children in the back. You look in the back, you're like, I can fit 3 kids back here.
It feels good. No, I mean it's good that you drive
hard to park.
You drive a truck and you have wide open spaces.
I've been told you're not allowed to call them a truck.
What do you call it?
Oh wait, no, you're not allowed to call it a pickup. You have to call it a truck over a pickup.
Yeah,
I'm still learning the Texas lingo.
Texas, it's a good place to be. Austin is like a weird subset of Texas. It's like, I don't know. It is Texas, but it's a weird part of Texas in a good way.
It's a liberal city. From Philadelphia. I was born in Philadelphia. I've lived in Philadelphia, Charleston, Chicago, Brooklyn, and now Austin. So I've hopped from different liberal cities across the country. But I will say every other liberal city that I lived in has been in a liberal state as well. So it's interesting to see the dynamic of living in a liberal city in a more conservative state.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, but like, look, at the end of the day, though, it's still Texas. I mean, you're in the new, the state of all the states in terms of freedom, progress. Like Texas is, and I'm from Oklahoma, so I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but Texas is like, it's a big deal in terms of where people are trying to, I mean, look at where the flows of people are moving. I mean, like, people aren't going out of Texas to the other states or coming from these other states to Texas. Right, like your example of this.
I agree, and that's one like theme you've heard is that people in Texas are worried because Californians, New Yorkers, other people from coastal elite cities are moving to Texas, and they're going to bastardize. They're going to turn it blue.
Right.
They're
Right.
They're going to bring their shit-lib policies to the bastion of conservative living in the United States, and I would just. Maybe true. I don't know. I don't know what's going to be true. I can't predict the future. I don't know how things are going to play out. However, I will say that I'm moving to Texas because I very much value the ethos, the ethics, the freedom that exists here, and I'm craving it coming from New York City, Philadelphia area, South Jersey. Like I very much respect, and that's what drew me here. Is like I can't take it up there anymore.
Yeah. I'm excited that you're coming down here. I mean, I'm not a Texan, but I'm close. I live in Oklahoma, so I'm not too far away. I'm driving distance from this area. And when you told me you were going to move down, I was very excited because I felt like you were getting pulled into this part of the world, this the general sphere of like living down here. And like Oklahoma obviously is different. Oklahoma and Texas have a little bit of a rivalry. College football, obviously there's a rivalry, but you're from the Philadelphia area. My family's from the Pittsburgh area, so similar, but frenemies.
Yins are from over there?
Yeah, right. So we have that going in terms of that background. And it's exciting. And like the thing about you coming down to NAPE and coming down to Houston is like as mining Bitcoin and as someone who's consuming energy and someone that is ultimately, at the end of the day, Bitcoin mining, in my opinion, is energy consumption. It is this element of converting energy into monetary value, and you're moving to what's arguably the energy capital of the U.S. Welcome. It's good to have you here. It's good to have you in Texas. I'm in Oklahoma, but it's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. And again, like energy, specifically oil and gas, has been like demonized in pop culture.
Very much.
And it's weird. And like we talked about earlier tonight, like people literally don't understand the correlation of energy production and proliferation and electricity production correlating very tightly with quality of life and lifespan and a number of things along those lines, and just want to demonize things that they truly don't understand. And as a Bitcoiner, and more specifically a Bitcoin miner, who has seen individuals poke fun at Bitcoin because of quote unquote the amount of energy it consumes.
They don't get it.
And people just don't understand. And that's something like we talked about earlier too, like Gamcast, Great American Mining Podcast, Tales from the Crypt. It's something I've been on for the last 3 to 6 months specifically, is trying to educate my audience about energy production and delivery. People don't understand grids, the extraction, delivery, the cost. Like you're in midstream. Yeah. Like I'm not trying to turn the podcast on you, but like people don't understand like how many people understand the intricacies of the midstream business that you work in?
Like nobody. Even working in it takes a career of understanding the nuances and the intricacies of what we do. And so like even guys that work in midstream, that work in connecting wells or energy sources to the end users, there's just so many layers of it, right? Like it's like that you can drill a well, the guys that, so what's interesting is that like the fact that we even have a niche, like the fact that there is even this niche between the people that create energy and the people that consume energy. And we have employees like Michael Matthews, who's here and he's hanging out and he's an expert in terms of this, figuring out how to create value for the energy that you're selling and that you're producing. And, it's a very niche thing. And like, even within the energy industry, the people that produce the energy, they don't fully understand how to monetize this value. And that's why we have a company and that we can create value for our clients. But then when you think about like taking that energy and then creating Bitcoin or, mining Bitcoin from this, it expands that to a level to where like our niche of, transcribing like what these energy producers and how they can get value for that, like that even expands even more when you get into the Bitcoin space. And so carving out a career where you are focusing on this nuance between you're creating energy, how can I get you paid more value for that energy? Like Bitcoin totally blows that whole paradigm wide open. And so when we first met and when you orange pilled me around energy, that's changed my whole paradigm around how I view this thing. And it changes everything, to be quite, the whole thing we focused on is like, how do we get energy to the demand source? And like, now we can take the demand to the energy, and like things have totally changed.
Yeah, it's pretty mind blowing. And it's a product of like free market economics. Like Satoshi just thrust Bitcoin onto humanity, and now we have to deal with the products of that. And the products of that are, if you want Bitcoin to keep going, and Bitcoin should keep going, I would argue, because it is a ethical monetary system in the digital age where there's only going to ever be 21 million. No single entity or government or organization can control it. It's run by individuals running software on their computers and checking every other individual in the system to make sure they're all running the consensus rules. Like, I think that's a much more ethically run monetary system for the modern age, considering everything that's going on now with the Fed printing trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too political, but with the situation in Afghanistan, the last week, it's become very apparent that you can spend trillions of dollars and posture like, hey, we're spending this for a good reason, and then it can evaporate like that.
What are the returns on Afghanistan? How do we quantify those?
Well, it depends who you are.
Yeah.
Are you the American taxpayer, or are you a war machine contractor?
I don't know. It's complicated, Marty. I would say that 20 years ago, it seemed more clear cut because we had 9/11, right? We had things that were like playing.
So how old were you during 9/11? When it happened. I think it was September 11th, 2001. How old were you?
I was in like 6th grade.
How old? Years?
12.
I was 10. So you're 2 years older than me. I was 10.
Or 13 maybe. I think I'm 3 years older than you.
Okay.
So something like that.
But I viscerally remember. I remember 9/11 specifically because we lived in Charleston, South Carolina. We came from the Northeast, from Philadelphia. I come from a big Irish Catholic family. My mom's the youngest of 8, and she had a bunch of brothers working in Lower Manhattan during 9/11. And I'll never forget, like, that day when 9/11 happened, like, at school. I was in 5th grade and in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, and the teachers were, like, not letting us watch anything. I didn't know if you wanted to go straight into 9/11.
No, we could go straight into 9/11. So, like, they weren't letting you watch anything? Like, it was...
But I knew something was up, and then at the end of the day, like, my mom picked me up from school, and she was, like, crying. She was like, she's worried about her brother. Like,
really?
Didn't know, but, like, the point I'm trying to make is very traumatizing, memorable point in our lives, I would argue.
Hugely.
10 years old, things changed drastically. You had the Patriot Act, and so the point I'm trying to get to is, like, I remember after that, I think in the lead up to the rabble rousing of the Iraq War, if you were, I was fucking 5th grade, 6th grade, in a public school. Like, we had to pick sides. And they were like, "Do you want to go? Do you want to?" Like, I remember freedom fries. I remember, and like
barely,
and like,
I don't feel like in Oklahoma there was much picking sides. I feel like we knew the side we were on in Oklahoma.
Well, you knew the side that you thought that was virtuous, to
right?
be on,
I'm just saying, like, that was like, we weren't like, there wasn't like a, it wasn't like.
So this is the point I'm trying to get to. Like, so that was the marker of the start of what ended this week, if you will, with Afghanistan. Like, 9/11 happened. It was
That's
like, all right,
bizarre. Like, this,
let's go bomb
this week,
right? But like
that's what's bizarre.
That it's not what's bizarre, but it's like almost like fuck. I was sold a lie for the last 20 years of my life. Like I remember getting rabble roused as a fifth grader, like pick freedom fries, like pick America, like we need to go bomb Iraq. But like, let's be frank. I mean, I know it's an oil gas podcast, but like the Saudis were the ones on those planes. Like it wasn't Al Qaeda, it wasn't Taliban. Like,
But it seems like a conclusion has happened this week in a way that we can all wrap our heads around. People that have been alive during this, and there's some people who listen to this that probably haven't been alive during that whole thing. But like for us, I mean, like I distinctly remember the start, and this feels like an end to this whole saga.
Yeah, it feels like an end to like a certain. I think the Taliban, what's going on in Afghanistan, is going to be part of the story moving forward. However, like there's been like a palpable like. That's the point I'm trying to make is like people like us who were that young when 9/11 happened, fast forward 20 years, a lot of people our age just like were bought in hook, line, and sinker with the rabble rousing. Like, well, we're fighting terrorism, we're going to win it. And
or
now
that, or just we just were like, it was just happening. I mean, like, I don't know that I was necessarily bought in. It was just like, this was happening, right? I mean, like, I guess I was bought in, but at the same time, it was just like, it was going on. Like, you're part of it. Like, you lived during that time, right?
Exactly. You're not giving them the choice. You're saying, hey, if you're here, like, you have to pick a side. Freedom fries, French fries, what is it? Like,
yeah.
I remember that vividly. And it's again, like, sorry for rushing into
well, I mean, like,
but
the thing about this, with it ties into oil and gas, because, like, and I'm not that saying this whole thing has to be oil and gas energy, but, like, it ties into it because there's a lot of, like, what we were doing then had to do with the sovereignty around controlling resources. And what's interesting is that, like, part of the reason why we decided that it wasn't as important to be there is because now we have all this domestic oil because of the shale revolution. But now we're seeing headlines around the minerals that we've left behind, that there's like a lot of rare earth and like these other mining minerals for this energy transition. So now people are saying, I saw an article today that said there's $1 trillion of minerals that we're leaving behind by leaving Afghanistan. So it's complicated, I guess.
It's very complicated. What is it, like lithium and cobalt specifically?
Yeah, there's a lot.
Apparently China's going to move in and start excavating all that.
Yeah.
But we live in interesting times, which is a blessing and a curse, and a very stereotypical adage to throw out there. But it's... we were talking about it earlier tonight, the sovereign individual. You're reading The Sovereign Individual.
I am, yeah. I'm almost halfway through.
We're at this inflection point in human history. We're at this digital age where we can video conference out to Twitter live right now. We have these very professional microphones coming in loud and clear. And again, trying to think of your audience and not my audience, because I'm very upfront and blunt on my podcast, and I don't want to like bring that. Like the division, the dividing tactics that have been pushed on everybody the last year and a half, specifically with COVID, with lockdowns, now with what's going on in Afghanistan, presidential election, obviously. It's just division, like chaos. Everybody's bewildered, if you will. Right. And it's a product of the digital age. You just have so much inundation of information that it's hard to make a decision. And like we were discussing earlier, that's one thing that I think is very important, is to recognize that we live in this certain inflection point where we're transitioning from the analog to the digital age, and being able to recognize when we're just being inundated with information, how to filter that. And I think that's what's causing most of the chaos in society right now, is that people just don't know how to filter the onslaught of information from multiple sources all over the place.
It's a lot. I mean, you think about it, and I've said this before, which is it's weird because I'm like, we have access to all this information. So there's this idea that, like, today we have more access to more information than we've ever had. So we should be smarter than we've ever been. But we also have, like, more access to more misinformation, too.
More shit.
It's just like you're getting bombarded with, like, all this stuff. And so, like, yes, you have all the facts, but on top of all the facts, there's a lot of other things that, like, you're just getting hit with, like, other things. Well, so it's like, it's complicated.
I think that's the biggest problem now, is like, how do you deem a fact a fact? Who do you trust? Who defines the facts in today's day and age? And that is the problem. That's why I think there's a lot of strife globally, not only here in the United States, but like Australia, New Zealand, Western world specifically. Like you have fake news, misinformation, all that shit. Like who defines what are facts? And at the end of the day, if you try to answer that question, sovereign individual thesis is you cannot trust anybody to define the facts for you. If you want to know the facts, you have to go and critically think and attempt to understand the world and make your, I don't want to say define facts, but like understand the world and the way it works because you've actually done the due diligence to attempt to do that. You don't allocate that to an ABC News, a CNN, an MSNBC, a Fox News.
Simple but wrong answers. Everybody's going that direction. Complicated but right answers. Very few people want to take the time.
Yeah, you love this meme.
I love that meme.
Right.
It's just like that meme is like a meme that is weirdly profound. Like,
it's timeless too.
It like explains a lot of things. It's like, right? It's like, is it easier to read the headline or
100%? 280 characters.
Right? Like,
I'm guilty of it. I'm a chronic tweeter. I love that dopamine hit.
Yeah,
I'm bad.
Yeah. I try to be the guy in the meme that's reading the book, that's walking the other way, that's like complicated but right. But we're all guilty of taking the fork in the road that's simple but wrong sometimes.
And when it's convenient, I feel like.
Yeah. When it self-affirms the biases that you have.
Exactly. It's convenient.
Right.
Like,
but like that doesn't mean that it's right. And so like it's just like you get to this point in life where it's like we're getting bombarded with all this stuff. Specifically what I focus on, which is energy, and what you focus on, which is Bitcoin. And increasingly those two worlds are one, which is like why I'm connecting with you and other people in your world, and why I've dove into this space so much is because we're both misunderstood. We're both people project things about how we're negative when we're really positive, and there's a lot of nuance that needs to be discussed with the two worlds that it's hard to do in these short form versions like Twitter. Like you can do it, but having the nuance and long form discussions, I think we can get there, and that's why I resonate with the Bitcoin stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like it's hard to grab people's attention when it comes to these hot button issues. It's like the ESG thing and like all the things that like oil and gas is attacked with. Like it's easy for people to say, like when you say things like clean energy, that's good marketing, right?
renewable energy.
Renewable or green energy. These are things that like peel back the layers of the onion and you say, what is clean, what is green, what is renewable? And it's complicated, right?
Well,
But it sounds good though when you say it.
Well, that's the thing. It's not complicated. It's
But it is
misleading.
It is complicated.
Misleading.
It is misleading, but it's
what
also
is like? How would you like? All right. How would you not? How would you define these things? But like, how would you portray that the market defines green versus renewable versus whatever?
Well, the market is investors.
ESG. Let's talk ESG. In the lens of ESG, how would you define renewable versus green?
I think
are they the same thing?
I mean, I think that like ESG, renewable green, it's defined by investors. It's defined by the media. It's defined by people that have a vested interest in these things, right? So, like,
what's the broad brush definition of ESG though?
Broad brush
energy, social governance. Like what environment, social governance.
Combustion. Yeah, it's combustion, right? I mean, that's the broad brush. ESG is combustion. It is a focus on reducing combustion, which is fossil fuels, scope 1, like whatever you want to call it. But if you really boil it down to like what these things mean, like it's not like if you say that like one thing is clean because it reduces combustion and the other thing is dirty because it increases combustion. But then like if you look at like beyond combustion, like what clean means, like if so you could like be a deep sea mining, like scraping the bottom of the ocean and harvesting, rare earth or minerals from the ocean floor, and that has been widely accepted as something that is bad. Like you can look at historically the last 5 years, like environmentalist groups would be like unequivocally, totally aligned with being like this is bad, like this is not good for the environment. But then the MSCI index and the ESG standards, like BlackRock has defined what are these ratings? And there's a company that could be a deep sea mining company, and they've rated them number 1 in ESG. This company has been hands down, everybody that's involved, everybody that cares has said that this company is bad, and yet now they're viewed as good because the ESG ratings have rated them as good. And so what does it come down to? It comes down to that, yes, they are destroying the ocean. Yes, they're destroying these habitats, but because the fact that they, in theory, are reducing scope 1, which is combustion, that ultimately makes them green because they create batteries for these rare earth minerals. That's where you get cynical and you say, well, is this really good?
Would you say cynical? That's where you get cynical?
I'm cynical a lot about this stuff. I don't know.
Like they're destroying entire habitats.
It's green, though, Marty. It's defined as green.
I don't want to come off. I have an iPhone. Like,
yeah.
There's lithium in that. There's cobalt in that. Like,
right.
I'm using a laptop. It's like, that's the thing that pisses me off about the ESG movement is, not my front. Like, we need these minerals to make these products. I think these products are good. It's like, all right. That's where I think the debate is completely misconstrued, where it's if you use certain fuel sources as an energy source, you're evil. And if you use like solar, wind, and all that, you're good. And they completely neglect to address the trade-offs on the front end of those supply chains. That's what starts to peeve me. It's like I can live with the fact, like, all right, there's these trade-offs. We need lithium, we need cobalt to make these end products that we like. I like these end products. I think they bring a lot of utility and a lot of value to humanity. Right. But I do agree, like, let's have a discussion, like, what is the extent to which we're able to disrupt our environment to bring this utility to our lives.
Right.
And I want to have that open conversation. I just don't think the ESG pushers and the green, solar, wind advocates are willing to have an open conversation, honest conversation about that, because they won't discuss the trade-offs on the front end and the back end of their supply chains. Right. That's what peeves me. Like, there's a huge misconception out there with the podcast that we have, Great American Mining, Tales from the Crypt, that I'm like anti-renewables, quote-unquote renewables in the form of solar and wind, where it's like, no, like, if it works, like, I hope it works, and I would like people to be able to access electricity via that medium, that avenue. However, like, if you're going to use that to denigrate fossil fuels and other fuel sources without disclosing the trade-offs that come with your end product, like, that's what pisses me off.
Yeah. Well, it's good marketing, you know, Marty.
Oh, it's very good marketing.
It's good marketing. Like, anytime you say something's clean energy.
That's the thing. It's like, what is clean? What is renewable? What is recycling? That's actually one thing in the Bitcoin mining space, particularly what we do with the flare gas. People are like, you're recycling gas. I'm like, we're not recycling gas. It's like, we're not like, we're not, what would you say? Like, what's the recycling process when you take a glass bottle and give it to you? Like, we're not processing gas and then, like, giving it to somebody else to use again. Yeah. Like, we're not recycling in that fashion. We're literally converting it to electricity.
Well, you're taking energy that would otherwise be wasted.
Yes, but that's not recycling, is it?
No, it's not. But what does, like, wasted energy even mean? What does that even mean?
Potential.
Like, what's wasted?
Potential for positive economic value, I would argue.
So, like, whenever, like, a Tesla, whenever it sits there and it idles and it uses 5% of its energy, they say 5% of the battery with a full charge is just wasted just idling with a Tesla. Like, is that green? Is that clean? Is that moral? Is it good that, like, we, you know, I mean, like, what I've said this before, I've said it on the podcast, and you'll see it if you listen, but it's like electrification is convenient. It's not efficient, right? Like, to get something electrified, like, that's really convenient. It's nice. It's nice to have electricity. It feels good, right? It's easy. Turn on a light.
We got 18 lights on right here.
25 lights. Super convenient, but is it efficient? Right.
And well, how do you define efficient? Like, maybe it's efficient what we're doing. Yeah. Like, we're getting this video out, potentially millions of people.
Yeah.
Is that efficient? Is that efficient use of this light?
Maybe. I mean, I would
argue. That's the whole thing. Like, who's to deem what is efficient, what is valuable, what is not?
Right.
And that's, like, when you get into this moral relativism conversations, like, you're never going to win. No, there's no answer to it.
You can't. Because the moralization of anything, not just energy usage, but the moralization of anything is subjective. right?
Yeah.
So it's like, you look at Bitcoin mining and you look at, because I want to put it in that context, you look at energy consumption. And if someone doesn't think that there's a moral use case for Bitcoin, then there's going to be no amount of energy that's good for mining Bitcoin.
I don't think there's a moral case for porn, but people keep making pornos.
They do. There's a lot of people that, like, what do they say that the Bitcoin network consumes less energy than clothes dryers? It consumes less energy than, there's a bunch of things. It's like it's like gaming computer. I mean, there's like, I can't remember the list, but there's like a list of things that Bitcoin network is at par or consumes less than, and no one questions it ever.
No. Well, it's because Bitcoin's very controversial in the sense that nobody can control Bitcoin. In the sense that you can control like a washing machine. Like you can set a washing machine to 30 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes. Bitcoin, you have no control of it. Maybe you can control the amount of Bitcoin you send and the fee rate that you put on that Bitcoin.
It's convenient to have your clothes dried though, right?
Yeah,
nice.
It's very convenient. But it's like,
who doesn't want to have wet clothes? You want to hang them up on a dryer line? No one wants to do that.
There are some purists out there that probably want
my
that.
computer in. Keep talking, Marty. Talk about how you love Bitcoin. Hold on.
I love Bitcoin so much. It's done so much for my life. No, it's this weird society we live in where you have this weird moral relativism. And so the point I want to make here with what we do at Great American Mining and what I think people who are outside of the Bitcoin world and think of it as a network that just consumes a bunch of energy. One thing that we're trying to do at Great American Mining and the Bitcoin mining industry at large is highlight to people that Bitcoin miners, like I want to be concise. I can't be concise because you can never know what any individual Bitcoin miner is doing at any given point in time. But like, I would like to say that many Bitcoin miners consume what I would deem as non-rival energy sources in the sense that we're not competing with residential consumers of electricity, where I'm not.
During this segment, the computer got unplugged and we lost power for a minute. When power came back on, the camera didn't come back on. It started using the camera from the front of the computer, so the video quality gets worse. And for a short period of time, the Rodecaster was not hit record because it shut off. So the audio quality is bad for about 10 minutes. And it gets better, so hang in there. What I found with oil and gas is that there's a couple ways to do it. Like one, like people want to talk about mining. People want to talk about how energy translates to this. But then beyond that, like oil and gas guys, like they just want to understand like how does mining equate to value like per MCF, right? Like they want to look at like their operations as they currently stand. And they want to figure out like how does this represent money or monetary value. And like the problem is like with just like explaining it to somebody in terms of oh, you're getting $20 an MCF or $30 an MCF. Like, that's great. You can explain that to them and they get that. But then, like, to get them to invest or to really buy in, they have to buy into Bitcoin. They can't just buy into, like, the fact that they can make more money converting their energy into this monetary value. That you have to actually convert them in terms of understanding. And we did it tonight. We had dinners with people tonight that were, like, very smart guys that, like, they get infrastructure investment. They get oil and gas investment. They don't get Bitcoin, and so it's a mountain to climb.
It's a huge mountain to climb because it's layered risk, right? You already had the layered risk of the exploration, the well drilling, the delivery. That's risky in and of itself,
right?
And you compound that with if you drill that well, you get natural gas. You got that risk. Let's add another risk to it. Let's plug it into generators and mine Bitcoin with it. We're gonna solve hash functions and hope that you get Satoshis in return. And you don't explain it that way. You say like, hey, like let's take this gas that you're wasting and mine Bitcoin with it. And even that is very risky to a lot of the old dogs in the oil and gas industry, from what I've experienced. There's outliers who sort of get it and understand the opportunity and go for it out of the bat. But I would say a majority of the old dogs in the industry that we've talked to are not receptive to Bitcoin.
Why do you hate ESG so much?
Excuse me?
Why do you hate ESG so much?
Because it's communism. Seriously, it's communism. It's literally ESG. If you want to get capital, you have to check these boxes in ESG. It's a top-down. What is communism? Communism is top-down control of an economy, granular control of an economy, and that's what ESG is. It's top-down. Like, if you want to get this capital, you have to check this box, this box, this box. So that I'm a very ardent free market advocate, and ESG is the exact opposite of free markets. You do not have a free market at all. You cannot engage in this market unless you check this box, and this box. All right, if you do that, then you can engage. That is a form of control that I am not comfortable with, and it is extremely hypocritical.
Yeah. My reason why I dislike ESG is a little bit different. I mean, like, I don't disagree with what you just said in some ways, but the reason why I don't really like it is because, like, the way that the things that are getting pushed forward with ESG are not achieving the goals. I'm pretty outspoken with this, right? It's like, okay, we want to be better, we want to be cleaner, we want to be greener, but looking at the policies that are being pushed forward, they're really not checking those boxes. So to your point, the top-down nature of it, yes, that is non-productive, and there's a lot of issues with it. But my basic fundamental flaw with it is more around the sense that that we're not actually getting to these things that we want to get to. Like, you could actually use hydrocarbons to get a long ways of the way there, if that makes sense. Like, you could cut emissions. I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, we have to create petrochemicals. We have to create these things that we need in our life, right? And so my bigger problem with it is that, like, I'm not against, like, minimizing impact in the sense of being better, cleaner, greener, whatever, but that's philosophical. But when you actually look at what's happening, it's not doing those things, right? I mean,
agreed, and you're falling prey to their fucking framing. Like, it's not impactful, like green. Like, what is green? What is renewable? What are we doing here? What is ESG? It's a form. Again, I completely agree with what you just said. It's not achieving the goals that it pretends to achieve, and you can never do that because you can't. You can't dictate how a market should act. That's what ESG tries to do. Like, we're going to dictate that you need to check this box, this box, this box. And as a product of that, the environment will be impacted less. I completely agree with what you just said.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I love about Bitcoin. Bitcoin gets at, like, a first principles mindset of the problems in the world. And Bitcoiners would argue that the problems of the world emanate from the fact that money, the predominant monetary good of the world, predominantly the U.S. dollar, has been bastardized to such a point that it doesn't accurately measure pricing mechanisms in the world.
Yeah.
Like, you can't have accurate pricing if you are so easily able to manipulate the production of dollars and expand the supply. Like, you can't have a measuring stick of value if you're just able to print more units of that ruler, and just add it on. Like, so I completely agree with you, and that's, like, and I would fall back on the Bitcoiner argument, which is that problem that you described of the ESG movement not achieving the goals of actually reducing impact on the environment coming to fruition stems from the fact that they don't have an accurate pricing mechanism. Like, the market should be pricing these things, and that's why I think what we're doing at Great American Mining with the flare gas specifically is a perfect example of a free market solution that actually addresses environmental impact on, like, without a mandate from ESG. It's literally economically incentivized. Like, we need cheap energy. Oil and gas producers are literally setting natural gas on fire, and we're like, don't do that.
Yeah.
We'll pay you a little bit for it.
Right.
Instead of spending money to light it on fire, we'll pay you a little bit for it, and we'll mine Bitcoin with it. You're going to be flaring less. We're going to be more energy efficient. We're going to be mining Bitcoin profitably. Free market solution to the impact problem on the environment. I don't need an ESG narrative to tell me to do that. It's pure economic incentives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Bitcoin network is pure economic incentives, right? Like, the whole thing. So, at the end of the day, I think that oil and gas and Bitcoin or specifically North American oil and gas and Bitcoin, touched on a couple things. Like, we're the only country in the world that have true property rights in terms of royalties. And, like, we actually own the minerals here. Like, personal property owns the minerals here. We have a capitalistic system where companies can, in theory, I mean, it's getting more regulated. Like some of these states specifically are pretty regulated. But if you think about like the characteristics of America and what we have here, and you think about the characteristics of what makes Bitcoin mining, what could be like the best scenario for it, like we should be like the leaders in mining for Bitcoin, in theory. But will we be?
I think so. I think China fucked up this year by literally making mining illegal in China. They had 60, arguably 70% of the hash rate beginning of this year. The crackdown on mining was serious this year, and there's arguments why it was as serious as it was. The strongest one that I tend to believe is that they had the 100th anniversary of the CCP, and the theme of that 100th anniversary was harmony, and the CCP deemed that Bitcoin miners sucking energy from the grid was not harmonious with their theme. So they said, it's the 100th year anniversary of the CCP. We can't have anything unharmonious, so all you miners, get the fuck out. And I think the result of that will be what you wish, is that I think North America, particularly the United States, I hope Canada, I really respect and love the Bitcoin miners in Alberta specifically. Shout out to Steve Barber, Upstream Data, and what those guys are doing up there. Like, I want him to succeed incredibly and vastly, and I think he is, and as have we been benefiting from the migration of hash rate from China to North America.
100%.
And I do think there will be a significant amount of hash rate in North America within the next year. The question is, will the idiotic federal governments allow it? In Canada, I'm not as hopeful. Here in the United States, I'm more hopeful. But it's not because I'm hopeful of the federal government being lenient. I'm more hopeful and confident in sovereign states exerting their rights and just saying, hey, fuck off. Like, we like this.
States like it. I mean, like, the reason that Ted Cruz got up and said we should strike this crypto language from the infrastructure bill wasn't because he's a Bitcoiner. It wasn't because the language was deeply flawed. In my opinion, it was because Ted Cruz recognizes that his state could benefit greatly from this freedom, technology, innovation that can come to his state. Texas is a huge energy producer. So I think someone got through to Ted Cruz, whoever that was, a lobbyist or an individual or a group or a corporation, and they talked to him and they said, this is a hugely important and beneficial thing for your state. And he understood at least the fundamentally that was true. That's why he said, strike this language. I don't think clearly, I don't think he even admitted. He's like, I don't understand this. But he at least got the fact that, like, this could be a positive thing for me. And, like, this whole movement that we're going through around states and, like, sovereignty and especially these energy-producing states, like, they get it. Like, they're going to embrace it. Because people are like, is Bitcoin going to be made illegal? And I said, my answer is always, like, they're going to tax it. That's an easy one.
They
right?
already tax
it. That's why I say they already
tax
it, right? They're going to tax it. They're already taxing it. They're going to continue to tax it. And then people were like, well, will the government ban it? And I said, governments will embrace it. I said, state governments already are. State governments already are embracing it, right?
Agreed. And federal governments will try and ban it, and that's a good thing. That means Bitcoin works. That means it's a threat. I swear to God, you laugh, but like that.
No, I mean, I'm laughing.
If they don't try to ban it, Bitcoin doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. Like, Bitcoin is a revolution on many fronts, predominantly two fronts. It's a digital asset that is scarcer than any asset has ever existed on the face of the planet, and it is a peer-to-peer network that completely demolishes the incumbent money transfer systems that exist on the earth. And that fundamental improvement on those two fronts, on the asset front and the network front, is threatening to the federal government. And that is where they exude most of their control, is over the financial system. If you cannot send money to somebody or accept money from somebody because the federal government and the banking system is stepping in and saying, we're not going to allow that, that perturbs and perturbs certain economic actions, where in Bitcoin, you can make the argument that is impossible. People will say it's not impossible, it's highly improbable, but I would say it's impossible.
What are the top three things that the federal government does right?
Wow. Counting people? Nah, they don't even do that right. I don't know. Like,
what do they bring? What's the value they bring to the table?
I mean, the argument of the value they bring to the table is protection, right?
Yeah.
Protection of private property rights, and that's we were talking about this earlier with the sovereign individual, like the basically if you're trying to argue on behalf of the state, what is the value add? It's we will protect your private property rights, and that is a position that makes sense in a non-digital world,
right,
in which Bitcoin exists. Like, I don't need the government to protect my private property rights anymore because my private property is my Bitcoin, and I have my private key, which I can represent in 12 words in my mind. I don't need anybody to protect that. I just need my memory to protect that and my ability to write that down and physically secure that to protect that. That's the revolution of Bitcoin and private property rights. Is you could it is vastly superior to a meat space protection of private property rights that the government provides. Bitcoin is, because you can protect your private property in the form of Bitcoin, in the form of 12 words, 24 words that you can hide. You can dig it in a hole in the ground. You could pick a book and find those 24 words and like have like a number scheme in your mind that like, here's the 24 words I need to access my wealth. You don't need the government to protect that wealth anymore.
Yeah.
And that is a revolution that most of the world is not attuned to at this point in time.
Not yet. So we've covered a lot, and it's just these conversations have to be had. And I think that what's cool about you being in Houston, Texas, you live in Austin, Texas right now. Mm-hmm. You're now in Houston, Texas. You're at this is the biggest, I guess you can argue summer NAPE is not the biggest. Winter NAPE will be the biggest oil and gas conference, but you're coming in.
There's 2 NAPEs?
Yeah, I mean, they try to have, like, usually it's like...
There's 2 NAPEs?
There's multiple NAPEs.
This was enough for me.
Yeah. There's multiple conferences around oil and gas, but, like, you are infiltrating the oil and gas world. And really, when I say oil and gas, like, we should just clarify it's energy. Like, people want to take the energy industry and bifurcate it into a lot of different segments: energy transition, solar, wind, renewables, oil and gas. But the reality is energy is energy. People use it. We got to produce it. Bitcoin uses it in a way that's never been used before, right? It takes it to, I mean, when I say that, I mean it uses it in a way that is transforming energy at the base property. And
so I have a semantics argument for you.
Okay.
So Bitcoin's based on SHA-256 hashcash SHA-256.
Okay.
Cryptographic algorithm. The Hashcash, developed by Adam back in the 90s, existed, and it's similar to what we have now in Bitcoin's proof of work. And that you need to, like, so Hashcash, when Adam Back first launched it in the 90s, was a spam preventative tool. Like, if you wanted to send an email, you had to solve a cryptographic function. You had to do work to send an email. And the point of that was to prevent spam, from email spam, junk getting spent to inboxes. But that failed because it was just easier to solve those functions, and you did it too fast, and it didn't work. The beauty of what Satoshi created was the difficulty adjustment. It was calibrating the network to the amount of computing power that was coming on or off the network at any given point in time, and sort of creating a stasis of block production.
Yep.
Across time. So that's the innovation that Satoshi brought to the world, was proof of work, Hashcash, driven by Hashcash, proof of work consensus mechanism driven by Hashcash with the difficulty adjustment. The difficulty adjustment, the calibration of the difficulty to mine Bitcoin at any given point in time, is the beautiful innovation that Satoshi brought to the world. That calibration of difficulty depending on the amount of hash rate on the network at a given point in time.
Like what we're talking about, we talked about, it's almost like a skill set, articulating these things. It's not easy to articulate when you come to traditional energy people. Like, you've been around this conference today. Like, most of the people that you've met or that you've seen here, like, how quick to grasp would they be of these concepts that you're talking about?
I can't say. I've been hanging out with you most of the day, and you get it. Been sort of It depends on the individual, right? Like, so there's many ways you can pitch Bitcoin. It depends on the person you're pitching it to. So if you're pitching it to like a wealthy person who understands wealth preservation, you'd be like, Bitcoin's the greatest store of value ever. Like, if you want to store your value in an asset that can't be diluted, like you want to store your Bitcoin, you want to store your wealth in Bitcoin. Other people, they're worried about censorship. They're worried about getting censored. They're worried about not being able to accept money. You know, you could pitch it to them like Bitcoin. It's the scarce asset, but it's also this peer-to-peer network where PayPal can't stop you from accepting funds because they don't agree with your political views.
Right.
Other people like it for the technology. They like it for the fact that you can build these second and third layers in Lightning, RGB, whatever it may be, and that you can use your Bitcoin to basically create telecommunications. Like,
yeah,
we were talking about Sphinx Chat earlier, where it's leverages the Lightning Network, which is a protocol on top of the Bitcoin network that allows individuals who listen to my podcast to stream me little bits of Bitcoin as they listen to my podcast, because they deem that that's the value I'm providing them with the information I'm sharing on my podcast.
Right.
So to answer your question, it depends. Like, what's the individual that I'm trying to pitch Bitcoin to?
Yeah.
Who is the individual?
It's a good point. I get back to that. I didn't make this up. I've heard this on other Bitcoin commentary and I've seen it on videos, but it's like, I don't think we know. I don't think we know like what the use case is going to be. Like, people argue, or like not argue, but they ask me like what the use case is going to be. And they're like, is it just a store of value? And I'm like, it's a store of value, but like, they'll be like, what else? Like what is the killer? What's the killer app? Like, what's the killer use case? And I'm like, well, if you were in the 90s and you asked about the internet, like what would the killer use case been? Like, no one could have described Netflix or Uber or whatever these social media apps are or anything. Name it. Name Wikipedia, like whatever. Like, name your thing. No one could have described it. And so when you ask me what the use case is for Bitcoin, like, I can give you my opinion, but like, you don't know. I don't know.
I don't know.
We don't know.
And that's the beauty of it too. Like, when you just submit yourself to the fact that you don't, like, that's where I think the most peace of mind comes from. When you realize, like, hey, we're born at this inflection point. This is a nation technology that, and so I'm 30. I grew up with the internet. I remember downloading AOL from a CD from the back of the Millennium Backstreet Boys album in like 97. Like, thinking where the world has come. Like, I remember when we first got caller ID at my house in Northeast Philly. I was like, oh, we could see that Aunt Lisa's fucking calling us? Like, what the fuck? Like, to think where the world has come from. Like, going back to Marty at that age, seeing Aunt Lisa's name on the caller ID for the first time and be like, oh my God, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
Like, trying to imagine him seeing where the world would be 23 years later. Like, I would never imagine this. Like, to pretend that I could do the same thing 23 years forward from now with Bitcoin being a thing, like, I don't know. Nobody knows.
We don't know. I mean, like, I just think it's going to create systems that are. So, like, I've been like, had some buddies I was arguing about. I talked to you about this earlier. That we were arguing about this like college football realignment, like the thing in there. Some OU fans.
I love this idea, and this is an idea I haven't heard yet for applying Bitcoin to like the media industry.
And like, they were just like arguing that, like, they sat there for an hour and they argued with me about how OU having a worse record was good for the conference. Was good for OU. They're like, we're going to go to the SEC and we're going to lose a lot more, but it's going to be good for us because we're going to make more TV money. That's what they kept saying. And I was like, guys, like, in 5 years, like, there will be no TV money. In 10 years, like, the TV money, like, that's going to be like, people are going to laugh at that and they're going to look at it as like Stone Age type of stuff. Like, why can't we take the Bitcoin network and build things like media on top of it, like Sphinx Chat? Like, why can't we build media on it? Why can't we build social media? Like, all these different things. It's like, are individuals and universities going to be like, is ESPN, like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of NBC? What's the point of ESPN? What's the point of all these networks? Like, if you could, like, take the Bitcoin network and use that to broadcast individual, whether that be like sports or like people's like whether it be social media like Sphinx chat, like does that just disrupt in general like these power structures? Like I think it's going to tear down power structures, I guess is my point. I don't know how that's going to happen. Like my guess is that people will find ways to use this distributed technology to be able to, you know, take away the power that is involved in all the things that we take for granted today and be able to distribute that out. Like it on the surface, it's money, and on the surface, it's value, and all the things that you talk about all the time. But like, can we extrapolate that further? I guess is my point. To different things. Like, will it be extrapolated further, or is that just like not going to happen? Like, is it just going to be a monetary network?
No, if you strip down what you just said, like Bitcoin is value. Like, what is value? Like, you know, what gives a digital good value? It's the time that you spent on it, the work that you expend on it, right? Like, so you're just more capable of representing the value of the time that you spend on certain activities in this digital form. Like you can break up Bitcoin down to 100 million Satoshis. Lightning Network, you can send, like I was showing you earlier with the Sphinx chat with people listening to my podcast. They're sending me 20 sats a minute, which is a tenth of a penny.
Right.
Like you can't do that over Visa or MasterCard or a wire transfer. Like it's just not possible. So like the micro interactions that you can have with an audience and more importantly from which as an individual exuding value outwards, not like just accepting it, like sending it out, like you can get more granular, right? Like so you can, like when it comes to like sports, like you can, like we were talking earlier, like you can have a lineman that you really love. You love his personality, you love social media, and like he plays for Texas, but like you want to send him a few more sats because he's funnier on TikTok or something.
Yeah,
like
he's
that.
got like his own brand.
Yeah.
He's built his own sovereign thing, right?
Yeah.
And that thing that he's built, and like that's what I wonder about Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network is, can it be a network that replaces like the internet in terms of just the things that people built on the internet? Like where can you stop? Like is it lightning? And like I don't know.
It doesn't replace the internet. It doesn't replace the internet. Energizes the internet. The internet, when it was first designed, the internet stack, like HTTP, IP, like all that. I'm completely butchering it, but like TCP, IP, all that shit. That stack, when they first designed the internet, like in the 70s and 80s, they had an idea for a native payments layer, but they never had the ability. So the internet is basically peer-to-peer information sharing, right? Obviously, we have centralized companies like Facebook, Twitter, eBay, whatever it may be, Google, that have leveraged that peer-to-peer information sharing network to build these centralized services that don't respect freedom of speech and stuff like that. Like at the end of the day, they are leveraging this peer-to-peer system. Similarly with Bitcoin, like Bitcoin's a peer-to-peer system, and you can put value granularly on things that you like on the internet. Yeah.
But like, I mean, like, but the thing about the Bitcoin network, and this is maybe I don't understand the technical aspect and the developers. I don't understand all of it, but like, what I do understand is that there is something very, very powerful about a network that is not controlled by anyone, right? So like, what can you do with that? You can do a lot with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, today, where Bitcoin, I would argue, provides the most value is for people in countries like Venezuela, Colombia, Iran.
But that's the obvious use case, though. What are the non-obvious use cases? Beyond, like, is it just a system of monetary value? And, like, again, I don't know the technical aspects of it. Like, I don't know what we can build. What can you build on this? Can you create media on top of this? Can you create other aspects on top of this, communications? Or does it not work like that? Because I honestly I don't know the technical aspects of the Bitcoin network. But what I do know is that we have a capitalistic network that is upheld by people that don't, they're not controlled by anyone.
Yeah. So we say like create media on Bitcoin. No, I don't think it's advantageous to like put MP3s, MP4s on the Bitcoin blockchain. However, with that being said, Bitcoin being this peer-to-peer distributed network that allows you to access MP3s, MP4s, videos, audio files that are held on self-sovereign servers. Like, that's the difference. That is the change that Bitcoin is making. It's allowing people to basically move the
monetary.
Well, they use the monetary network of Bitcoin to access files that they may not like. So, like, censorship's a huge thing on Facebook and Twitter.
Right.
So imagine that's a big thing in Bitcoin. Like, if you want to be a Bitcoiner and you actually want to do it right, you run your own node. So that means you run software on a computer you own. It could be your laptop. It could be a Raspberry Pi. It could be a dedicated gaming computer that you have for your Bitcoin activities. But, like, you can extend that further, right? Like, you can say, hey, I can hold files on my computer that aren't Bitcoin related, that are MP3s, that are photos, that are videos, and then, you know, similar to like BitTorrent and stuff like that, you could seed this stuff out, and you can basically create paywalls to say, hey, you want this file, instead of going to YouTube and saying, like, I'm going to watch this YouTube video that talks about Alex Jones.
Right.
One day you're able to access it. One day you aren't able to. You can go access an individual who has that file on their computer and say, hey, I'll pay you a few sats to access that. And they're like, hey, I have it available. It's 5 sats. If you pay it, you can get it. Whereas YouTube will just be like, no, you can't. We don't like what they're saying.
Right. I guess, like, what I'm describing maybe, and, like, we're getting, like, long in the tooth here. It's getting kind of late. We have other things we could do. We could be partying in other places.
Are we supposed to be partying in other places?
We could be because it's NAPE. We have people here that we're subjecting to this conversation, and we've gone for over an hour. But the point is, I guess what in it is, like, I don't know. I mean, like, to what you're describing, you're describing the use case. And I guess maybe what I'm saying is that maybe I'm conflating some of these DeFi themes, which to be fair, a lot of the DeFi stuff doesn't work because it's actually not decentralized. It's actually not.
No, like, I would stop before there. Like, I agree, it's not decentralized, but, like, I don't think it's. DeFi is just replicating the system that Bitcoin was created to run away from. But that's my beef with it.
But I mean, like,
first off,
but like this idea that, okay, so here's, I guess, where I'm thinking about is that you have this network that's upheld by individuals that are capitalistic, that are upholding this. It's a monetary network today, right? Like, it's just transactions, right? The blockchain. It
will always be a monetary network.
Always, right? But at the end of the day, it's still a network. It's a network, right?
All monetary networks are networks.
But
the U.S. dollar is a monetary network. It's just controlled by a central authority.
Is the internet a monetary network, or is it just an informational network?
It's a network that allows you to send. Up until this point, like, the only way to send and receive monetary value over the internet protocol was clunky, like, debit credit card systems, and now you have a native value system where this debit card systems could block certain payments and block certain access to certain content, where Bitcoin, it's much easier to create apps and avenues for which that is impossible.
And I guess to your point is that, like, Bitcoin is not designed to send information or things other than the monetary value. It just truly is, it's transactions, and it's a ledger.
You can represent data in that monetary value too. I think that's what you're trying to get at.
That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that conceptually, something that is not controlled by anyone, that is, like, upheld by everyone, is powerful. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm saying. And, like, I don't understand how that's going to be applied, because there's no way for me to. But I do think that there are some ways it's going to be applied that we haven't thought of.
Yeah,
and I think it's going to change things. That's all I'm saying.
As somebody who's been in Bitcoin for quite a while now, like, I think I have a good grasp on how it works, how it is affecting the world, how it will affect the world. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. We literally cannot fathom how.
That's what's exciting.
Yeah, and it's exciting and it's liberating, because you can literally understand exactly how the traditional monetary system will act, the monetary transfer system will act too. Like, if I say this and try to send it to this person, they'll block it.
Yeah.
Where Bitcoin just completely borks that system and says that doesn't exist. And what happens when that doesn't exist, we don't know.
Yeah. Fix the money, fix the world, right?
Facts.
Yeah. So it was fun. This is a good time. NAPE 2021. Is that the year we're in?
I think so. No.
I don't remember what year we're in.
No, dude, we took a year off. It's still 2020.
Had to think about it. It was a good time, and we should probably go out and do fun things. We have other people here that we're subjecting to this. We're people online that we're subjecting to this, but it was fun to riff for a little bit, and we'll do it again sometime soon. We got other ideas for content, but I'm glad we got to just hang out and do it.
Max, it's always a pleasure. I hope I wasn't too buzzed for this.
No, dude, I'm equally buzzed. And for everybody listening, there was one person that commented and he was like, "This sucks. It's like, you guys are terrible." So for you, fuck off. We had fun doing it. The rest of you, thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate it. It was fun stuff, Marty. Thanks, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, dude. Houston represent.
NAPE.
Yeah, there we go.
NAPE.
Right.
You guys are fucking stupid.